Hello and welcome to this talk on how the radical left conquered everything and how you can save your child in America. I would first like to say thank you to a homeschool dad in Texas who asked me to do this about a month ago. And because of you, I'm presenting it, and I'm very honored and thankful that you asked me to. I always feel honored when I'm presenting something about education. As my dad said, educating children is one of the most noblest professions. And this is a very important topic for all Americans to know about. A couple of books I'm recommending to you, which include a lot of the information that's here. One is by Christopher Rufo, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. The second is by myself, and that is my new American history high school textbook, American History, The Story of Liberty, America's Ancient Heritage Through the Reagan Revolution. Now, about 3 years ago, my oldest son, who is our online class instructor, was very excited about this book by Christopher Rufo. And he told me, "You have to read it, Dad. It's amazing." And I was a little bit reluctant at first because he gets excited about about many things with reading. And he gifted me this book. So I read it and I was amazed. And I was so happy that he gave it to me. And then I asked him, "Adam, when did you read this book? It's amazing." He said, "Oh, I didn't read the book. I just listened to the podcast." And so that's the way it is with our younger generation. But I'm very grateful that he keyed me onto this book, and it helped me see my company in a truer light, knowing the information from this book. So we had a lot to cover today, so I want to go through it right away. We start with the first known law in colonial America regarding education, and that is the Puritan New England law called the Old Deluder Act of 1647. Now, the deluder that the law was referring to was Satan. And this act for the Puritans codified into law that each parent had the duty and responsibility to teach their child how to read and write in order to read the Bible. So, kind of interesting that right away, in really the beginning of the founding of the United States of America and English colonial America, the government was highly involved in education of children. We sometimes like to think that government in colonial America was tiny, and it was, and that it wasn't involved in education. However, here we have this first law from 1647 demanding that parents teach their children how to read and write to access the Bible. And so already in the very beginning, there was a tradition of citizens enacting laws, reflecting their morals, ensuring the education of children. In Europe in the 1700s was the age of absolutism. The monarchs were gaining in power. Maria Theresa of the Austro-Hungarian Empire is one example of the most powerful monarchs. And it was during this time that Maria Theresa reformed the education system in the Austrian Empire. She did it so that it would be secular, controlled by the state, centralized, making sure that everybody throughout the empire was learning the same thing. And one goal was to provide educated bureaucrats to run her empire. And America was founded in large part, in most part, by European Americans. So many of the Europeans coming over to America had been used to this system and thinking that in Europe things are more advanced with education, perhaps wanting to adopt some of these things as well. The 1800s in the United States of America and throughout the world, but especially in the United States of America, saw an incredible growth of technology. We can call this the age of progress or the age of science. We have the invention of the steam engine. Now, of course, it wasn't invented in America. The first known steam engine was invented by a Greek over 2,000 years ago. But in America, it was an American who made it profitable and practical. I believe it's Fulton, Robert Fulton, with the steam engine ship, making it practical and profitable. And so we have the steam engine train. We have the telegraph, the mechanical reaper. Here's a picture of Edison, the electric light bulb, the electric power plant. In Europe, they were first in Germany to create the combustible engine, but it was in America again, where an entrepreneur, an inventor, Henry Ford, made the car possible to be bought by the average person. And of course, developments into oil and steel. Amazingly, from 1865 to 1900, the standard of living rose for all Americans. At the same time, inflation fell. Now, this was a shock to me when I first learned of it, but what happens with new inventions is that man's productivity increases at a great amount. And the 1800s saw so many inventions that productivity rose, where numbers of hours worked didn't increase. And so it became cheaper to create things, and thus inflation fell. So there was this overall feeling in America that trusting science, trusting the experts, we are going to achieve incredible heights of standard of living and also in everything as well. And this type of euphoria was also available or evident in Europe, okay? Especially at the turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s. People really believed that we were entering a new era of humanity. In the mid 1800s in Massachusetts, interestingly enough, this was the same state that adopted the old Deluder Act of 1647. Massachusetts had a man named Horace Mann who was involved in the Massachusetts Board of Education. Now, Horace Mann visited Prussia at this time. Prussia was an emerging military, not kingdom yet, but it was a princedom, I guess. And he visited their state education system in Prussia. People were trained to be obedient to the state. It was in northern, what we would call Germany today. And the state education system had many things about it that Horace Mann liked. It had state-supported schools for everybody, mandatory school attendance for all children. You couldn't become a teacher unless you had a certificate from the Prussian state school system. And Horace Mann believed that many of these aspects would be wonderful in America. He also liked it that it was secular and out of the hands of the parents. And so he came back to Massachusetts and he wrote and spoke that he did not like the militaristic system of Prussia, but many other things in the Prussian education system he liked. And so he pushed for mandatory schooling, state certification and education of teachers, secularization of schools, and this promotion of democracy, teaching kids to get along with each other in a democratic society that is not religious. And so in the mid 1800s, Massachusetts adopted many of these elements of Horace Mann's program, and he is called the father of the common school. We can trace, I guess, the public education system in America back to this person. Again, we go back to this idea of science and progress. And of course, at this time, Charles Darwin wrote on the origin of species, the theory of evolution. Now, what's interesting is that this title kind of infers that The article or the book is going to be about how things originated, how things began. But the it is not. His writing is not about how things began, but how things evolved over time. And his writing and philosophy and belief of an atheistic world, right, not created by God, became the dominant thinking of the educated classes. And this had a great effect on leaders of education in America. Okay, you can see how it ties into Horace Mann's ideas of keeping or raising children with a secular viewpoint, having the state not having anything to deal with religion. And this was not in the tradition of the American education, right? We saw in the old Deluder Act of the 1647, there was a tradition of religion in American education. And I didn't talk about it at all, but most kids were in the 1800s and 1700s were taught in a one-room schoolhouse a few months of the year during winter, and the teachers were hired by the parents. The parents would get together, pool their resources, hire a teacher for a few months, and they would teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, and morality and Christian morality. Okay, that was the American tradition. And here we have this new wave coming in, this secularism, science, and atheism really taking over in the mid 1800s to the late 1800s. And then these ideas really come to fruition in the early 1900s with the progressivism movement. Okay, this idea to organize society on scientific principles. This is President Woodrow Wilson, a progressive president, a Democrat who won the election primarily because the Republican Party basically split into two, with Teddy Roosevelt and Howard Taft battling for the conservative vote. And interestingly enough, both Taft and Teddy Roosevelt were also progressive, okay? Although they were Republican, progressivism really was a nationwide movement. It wasn't affiliated just with one political party. It was really a national movement, both Republican and Democrat. And the ideas were that experts should be in charge of society and should be making decisions about people's personal lives and social lives. Also, part of progressivism was expansionism, that the United States, being a top country in industry and also being an Anglo-Saxon country, should expand and should take over other territories, thus the Spanish-American War in 1898. So Woodrow Wilson believed that the Anglo-Saxons were the superior race on Earth. And then you have the eugenics movement. This idea was that people had certain traits because of their genes, and that some people were genetically superior to others because of their racial heritage. Woodrow Wilson was a strong believer in this, as well as this lady down here. This is Margaret Sanger, right? Margaret Sanger is the founder of an abortion rights movement that later evolved into Planned Parenthood. And her whole idea was to limit the number of undesirable children, which basically meant people of color, Black people, and people who are not Anglo-Saxons, people who are not educated, the poor. She wanted to limit the birth or end the birth of these types of people. So organized society on scientific principles. And then Amendment 16, the amendment that gave the federal government the right to tax income, passed at this time as well in 1913. So when the Constitution was written, the founding fathers did not want the federal government to tax individual income because they thought that should just be people should enjoy the benefits of their own work and not have to give a portion of it to the federal government. But the federal government now, led by Wilson, other people like him, believed they could organize society better. So you're kind of getting the idea now that eventually this is going to become part of America's education system, led by experts to control society. World War I occurred right after this big rise in progressivism in America. And it was tragic. It was horrible. And what happened is that many Western intellectuals visited Europe if they were from America, obviously. If they were in Europe, they were already there. But they visited the battlegrounds and they were distraught. Okay. This is one of them right here. This was an American, Whittaker Chambers. He visited Germany, and this was after World War I. And he was devastated. He himself had grown up in a secular environment in the United States, right? So not religious at all. And he saw what happened in World War I, and he believed that the problem of poverty and the problem of war could not be solved by Western traditions, that the Western tradition, Western civilization of the integrity of the individual, of honoring individualism, and traditional Judeo-Christian religion, he believed it had failed, as did many American intellectuals in the early 1900s. And so Whittaker Chambers joined the American Communist Party, and he then later joined the Soviet underground Communist Party in America. And I highly recommend that you read this book. It's super exciting. But he explains very well why American leftists would believe in communism. And it wasn't an aberration. It wasn't just a small group of people going totally to the left, wanting a totalitarian government. It wasn't. It was a large number of intellectuals in the early 1900s, learning at our top universities, or like him, reading books and joining leftist organizations. Okay, so interestingly enough, because of books and his experiences in life, he became someone who turned on the communists and turned on the Soviet underground communism and testified in Congress about it. And because of his conversion to Christianity, which is really amazing for me that he learned of this through his life experiences and through reading books. But at this time, early 1900s through the 1950s, there was a large number of American intellectuals and political leaders and education leaders who were believing this idea of communism, of an expert group running education, controlling what children learned, learning things that are anti-Western civilization, anti-Judeo-Christian, anti-free market system, of course. This was not just a few people. We now go to a focus of Christopher Rufo's book, and he focuses on this one man, Herbert Marcuse, who is the grandfather of the New Left in America. And born in Berlin, Germany, he's was a Jewish person, but a cultural Jew. He wasn't a practicing Jew. He did not believe in God, and highly intelligent. And he escaped Nazism. And during the late 1930s and during World War II, he joined the OSS, which was America's early form of the CIA. He was, very strongly in favor of America and the Allies defeating fascism. And initially in America, he was a believer in the American system of freedom. So, America won World War II. He helped out, as did many German professors and intellectuals who escaped fascism. However, sometime in the 50s, he had a change of thought. He believed that America actually is the center of evil for the world because of its ideas of the free market, and that America has to be transformed into a radical leftist society. Now, early 1900s in Germany, there was a school of thought called the Frankfurt School. And the Frankfurt School intellectuals combined the theories of Marxism and psychology to promote a program of change in how to change a society from free market, capitalist, Western Judeo-Christian culture, how to change it from that to communism, to socialist utopia. And so he became actively involved in writing and speaking and calling for revolution in America. He was a professor of philosophy on many different American campuses, the leading American campuses. And he ended up at UCSD, which is University of California, San Diego, promoting these critical theories. So, key to understanding some of Marcuse's works is he believed that the workers in capitalism were ignorant of their situation, that workers in a free market system like in America didn't know it, but they actually are miserable. And they're being fooled by financial goodies, that workers in America, according to him, had it pretty good. They had weekends off, vacation, they could save money, they could buy homes. So they had some financial goods, but in actuality, they were miserable and they just didn't know it. They were being fooled. And so in 67, he gave a speech in Germany where leading Western leftist intellectuals came, and he called for revolution in the West. He wanted radical, violent revolution. And this was, not just in 67, it was happening throughout the 60s, but this speech kind of like crystallized a lot of his ideas, and you could see where he was coming from. He said that in the West, and especially in America, it's not such an issue of class where you have a nobility oppressing a lower class, because in America we don't have nobility, but it's a question of race. And in America, the white man is oppressing the black man and other minorities. And so he said in America, we have to focus on that and to teach blacks and other people who are not white to rise up. He also spoke about the great refusal, which means like a nihilistic strategy for saying no, for not being involved in capitalism, not being involved in promoting American civics, and destroying the ideas of the American founding, anything to write about that would make American founding fathers look terrible. And then this idea, liberating tolerance, liberating tolerance. So according to Marcuse, if you were to allow somebody with conservative viewpoint to speak at a college, you are actually causing great harm to the students and to society. That you have to shut down all conservative thought, all thought and speech that is for the free market. And when you do so, then only the truth can be spoken. And so therefore, it is liberating tolerance. So as you see, Marcuse's words really are a paradox and go against each other and are not consistent. But this type of thinking infiltrated many minds in America during this time. So, review of the radical 60s and the new left. It's called the new left because when the Soviets became communists in 1917, some in America believed it was going to happen in the US. It failed. And so this new left were leftists looking for another way how to change society. And so in the 60s, a group, many groups, but this one in particular, first known as Weatherman Underground, and then the Weathermen, was responsible for over 4,300 bombings and murders of policemen. Now, their belief, along with other radical groups, was that Americans were going to rise up and have a violent overthrow of the government. And it just needed some bombs and violence to kick it off. Now, um, along with their ideas of violence and hating Western society, there seems to be tied with them these strange ideas of lack of morality in your personal life, in your life if you were married, for example. And so there were many instances where the Weathermen gathered, and there were days of bacchanalia, of orgies and drunken fests and just disgusting sexual parties. That's part of it too, this rejection of traditional morality. The Black Panther Party, which was a radical and violent Black movement, which was pushing for cash reparations for Blacks, monthly income, and release of all Blacks from prison. Okay, you may recognize some of these things they were promoting later on in the Black Lives Matter movement, and they are connected, and I will be getting to that in a minute. And you have this organization called Students for a Democratic Society, which in the 60s, it sounded good, right? Oh yeah, who is against students who want a democratic society? But actually, it was a cover for a communist movement, which was funded by big money. And there were over 400 of these organizations throughout colleges. And their goal was to shut down universities and to start the revolution at that moment, okay? With these violent student takeovers. So, the hippie and peace movement of the 60s wasn't so peaceful. Some of the hippies were part of this organization, of these organizations, and wanted violent overthrow. Not all of them, but some of them were. And then we have these kind of two individuals, which are, I think, have good example for us to show like how crazy things were. So Angela Davis was a student of Herbert Marcuse, and she wanted to implement his ideas immediately. And so she was a Communist Party member. She was involved in a prison break where she provided weapons to two men who had been accused of crimes, of violent crimes, and these men attempted a violent breakout with the weapons. People were murdered, and she was put on trial as an accomplice of this violent breakout. And during the trial, which happened in the San Francisco area in the late 60s, she argued that she was a political prisoner and that American justice was a sham, and she was trying to free political prisoners. And so, even though it was proved in court that she was guilty, they let her go. Now, she went on to becoming a professor and establishing schools in the Los Angeles area to train revolutionaries. She also toured the communist world as a hero in the late 60s and early 70s, visiting Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, and other communist lands. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who is the author of Gulag, wrote about Angela Davis, how in communist world, they had to learn how she was such a hero for them when he knew it was all a sham and all a lie. She then became a respected professor and I believe she's still alive right now. This man, Aldrich Cleary, was involved in the Black Panther movement. And the Black Panthers, they wanted a separate society in America of Black people. He was convicted of burglary, assault, rape, attempted murder, and in his own words, he also was a mass rapist. He said that he practiced rape first against Black women, and then he went into white societies and practiced it against them um, because he wanted to inflict pain on white society. He escaped police and lived in Cuba, Algeria, and France. Then, later in his life, he converted to Christianity, then Mormonism, then Catholicism, and then created his own Islamic Christian religion. Aldrich Cleary. I'm not making this up. So, 1972, Nixon wins a massive election, and his political main motto is law and order. He wants to reestablish law and order in America, and he crushes the Democrat. Now, Nixon really wasn't a conservative. He was very liberal in many of his practices, but he wanted law and order. And at that time, he worked with J. Edgar Hoover, who was the FBI director, to crush the New Left. And this election result really demoralized the radical left. And Nixon, working with Hoover, did crush the New Left. And within a few years, the New Left realized they're not going to win with these tactics. America is not going to rise up and violently overthrow the government. And so they come up with a new idea. The New Left comes up with this idea. And it's called basically the Long March Through the Institution. So there is a German named Rudi Dutschke who writes that during the Chinese Revolution, Chairman Mao, the communist leader, retreated for 2,000 miles. He was losing at the beginning of this retreat, but at the end, he inspired the Chinese to join the communist movement, and the Chinese communists won the Civil War. And he's saying that the left in America and in Europe needs to have a long march through the institutions. The left needs to put down their guns and bombs and pick up books and take over the universities. They need to train youth in universities. Those youth then later will become leaders in business and leaders in government. And this is how the New Left conquered American education. They succeeded in doing this. If you run through numbers of leftist faculty on universities, it's unbelievable. Many colleges have no conservatives in their humanities or in their humanities departments. This man right here is Bill Eyre, and this is Bernadine Dorn, and they were both in the Weathermen, and they married each other, and they both became respected professors in American colleges. President Obama, it's believed, started his political campaign for office in this man's home in the Chicago suburb. So he had the support of Bill Ayers and his network of helpers. And so the New Left, that's how they took over. Okay. This lady right here is Erica Sharover Marcuse. She passed away, and she was Herbert Marcuse's third wife. She had been his student. She was 40 years younger than he was. And she was a full apostle of these ideas, the New Left. She is believed to have come up with the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and gave these seminar trainings to businesses in America and promoted this idea to infiltrate businesses and the federal government. Derek Bell, he was the first Black American professor at Harvard, and he had been a great and successful lawyer for the NAACP, working for equal rights, civil rights. But sometime through his career, he came to the idea that America will always be racist, that no matter what you do, no matter how many rights Black Americans get, America will never change. And so he was fired at Harvard, although if you read in some sources, they say he quit. And he got together with many of his students and they wrote the critical race theories. So the critical race theories are kind of a marriage of the critical theories from the Frankfurt School and the ideas that America is a racist country. And so CRT is a part of this diversity, equity, inclusion. And as far as I know, it's also still a part of state education systems in America. That little children in certain places are learning these ideas. So, language of the new left, DEI. It's very tricky, right? The languages that the left uses. If you say you're against diversity, it sounds like you're a bigot. If you say you're against equity, it sounds like you want one group to dominate. And if you oppose inclusion, it sounds like you're a racism. During these trainings that Sharover did, and some of my friends in the corporate world had to go through, they were put in a privilege walk where, based on your situation, you stood in line. If you were a white, heterosexual, Christian male, married, that means like you were the biggest oppressor of the whole group. You would go on one side of the line. And then if you were a Black female, lesbian, you would go on the other side of the line, meaning that you were the most discriminated against in society. And so everybody had to talk to each other and line up based on that. And no matter what you did, based on the color of your skin, you were considered either an oppressor or an oppressed. It didn't matter how you acted, how you were raised, what you believed in. This is how they were teaching it. Of course, this is racism. It is wrong. But for a time, this was the way in many federal offices and businesses in America. And this idea of institutional racism that you cannot escape it. And so Presidents Obama and Biden embraced these ideas, and you can look at the programs that they started, look at the words that they used throughout their presidencies, and it appears that they were trying to use these things to take children away from the control of their parents and have the raising of children and upbringing of children into the hands of the state, of the government. And of course, part of this includes the rejection of the American founding fathers and founding documents. So part of DEI, part of this new left, of course, is to destroy America's founding beliefs so that children, when they don't have anything to look up to, will go to something else. In the 2010s, according to Rufo, the new left had won. They had conquered the universities, they had conquered the corporations, and they had conquered much of the federal government. However, he points out a truth, and wherever radical left is in charge, wherever communism rules, there is failure. So in schools, there are no schools that are run by these radical leftists where the children are learning at a great speed, right? The schools are horrible where there is the woke culture or the radical left. In businesses where they promote these ideas, they lose great amounts of money. So I'm thinking of recent example of Bud Light or Hollywood's movies, all pushing these woke idea. And in universities, instead of students learning how to think critically, how to discuss, how to do research, they're just learning how to be indoctrinated. So the radical left, when it's in charge, it fails. And that's what happened in the 2010s. Americans started to see the failures of the radical left and woke up. And of course, we have as an example of this, the two triumphs of President Trump. And according to President Trump, it would be 3 triumphs. Um, and so Trump heard about Christopher Rufo's ideas in his first term and immediately moved to ban DEI in all federal offices and everywhere else that receives federal funding. And he is currently battling liberal state politicians and universities fighting to keep DEI. So we're now in the middle of this battle of society. And Christopher Rufo writes that if we are fighting DEI and trying to return to what we were, then we are part of the counter revolution. And for that, I really like that my son passed on to me that book, because classical historian is part of this counter revolution. So, how to save your child in America? Recognize the new left as a failure and nihilism. They want to just destroy. Teach the greatness of American founding fathers, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. Teach critical thinking skills in history. So it's not enough for kids just to memorize the past, but they have to learn how to analyze it and to think about it and to discuss it. Teach the kids reading, writing, and arithmetic and historical facts. Don't indoctrinate them. Teach the Socratic discussion in history. Read the Bible, pray, love your family, believe in the truth. These things will win back our children and America. And I'm just going to, right now, I'm going to very quickly run through a set of slides, very quickly. It'll take me about 2 minutes, just showing the various products and programs of classical historian. Now, I didn't realize I was part of Counter Revolution until about 2 years ago. But I knew innately that there was something terribly wrong and that children in America lacked good history materials to learn these things. And so that has what has been really inspiring us at Classical Historian to create. And so we have a number of games that we teach history that are engaging and fun, teaching kids cultural literacy through these games, through card games, various card games teaching the Constitution, history at different parts. Children are learning the beauty of Western civilization, and they're learning how to analyze things. We have an American civics curriculum for grades kindergarten through 5, where they learn all of these concepts at a young age, including songs. And we back it up with an animated video program that is fun. We have a federal holidays book that teaches the greatness of our holidays, the greatness of the people that we honor on these days. And it also shows the debate that exists for some of our holidays and has teenagers discussing these things so that they can become familiar with what the revisionist historians are teaching. We have history books that promote a Western civilization viewpoint. Now, our history books are very similar to books that were written in the 1800s. Okay, they had belief in Western civilization, belief in integrity of the individual. They were very favorable towards free market, towards religion. But they also were not specifically religious books. All of our materials are written for public schools. I had like this idea of vocation to change how kids are learning everywhere in schools. And so I just came out with a high school American history book we're very excited about. It's just called American History. I don't have a little video of it here. This is our junior high book. And we have our Socratic discussion curriculum, where kids ages 12 and over learn how to analyze history and to discuss it. They come into contact with these questions that challenge them to have a position in history and to discuss and argue. And we have history education for teachers. We have a membership a digital membership society called the Dolphin Society. And I also can come to your school and give live trainings as well. We have a monthly book club that's beginning early October. You can check it out on our homepage of the website. We're going to be reading American History, the book that I just finished. Also, there's sample classroom discussions. So I'm going to go ahead right now and turn off the recording that I have and to just open it up for discussion. If you have any questions or anything, we can discuss. But for those of you who are listening to this recorded, thank you very much for joining me. Hope to see you sometime in the future. And please check out our other videos and recordings where I do go into detail on all of those books and materials that I presented here. You can check them out there. Thank you.